Hi, everyone. My name is Bonnie Garcia Glockner. I'm the Assistant Director for the Office of National Fellowships. Thank you for joining us today. With me is also Christine Garst, our Graduate Assistant. So if you do have questions throughout, feel free to put them in the chat. She's monitoring that, and she'll be letting people in as they join us. So if you're here today, hopefully it's because you are in your first couple years of your undergraduate career. And this can be a real pivotal time for students because you're focusing in on what your actual interests and goals are after graduation. You're starting to look for different opportunities and ways to really go beyond just academia. And that's where our office comes into play. So we assist students as they go through the application process for 60 plus nationally competitive fellowships and awards. And these awards really allow students to dive deeper into their academics or perhaps explore areas that they haven't gotten to do elsewhere in their career. And starting those early can really make or break what you want to do later on down the line. Those applications, though, can be very different than what students are used to filling out. They usually require some amount of writing about oneself that we are perhaps not used to doing, that sort of reflective nature in our writing. And so what we're going to talk about today are a few awards that students can apply to in those first 2 years. So if they're looking for ways to get engaged or move beyond just the classroom, we are here to help with that. This, as you will see, is really just the tip of the iceberg of what our office works with. And it's not uncommon for students to contact us and say, hey, I found this fellowship and award. Would you be able to help me with that? So definitely listen, keep your ears open for things that might interest you, but know that if you come across something, you're more than welcome to come and talk to us directly about that. We would love to the opportunity to assist. So I'll mention some other people here. Like I said, I'm the assistant director. We've got, I didn't update your name on this. We've got our graduate assistant here. We also have our director, Dr. Filer, and then Jesse Wieland, our associate director. So we're a relatively small office, but we can make a really big impact, hopefully, in what you're trying to do here at FSU. And it doesn't hurt to start now. So this thing isn't working. Great. There we go. So one of the first ones that I want to introduce is this Fulbright US-UK Summer Institute. Some of you may be familiar with the Big Fulbright, which the Big Fulbright is a nice way to go overseas to a variety of places to do a research project or to teach English abroad. In this case, the Summer Institute is really built for students that are early on in their academic career. And it's a chance for you to go to one of the very specific places for these 3 to 6 week long programs that try to hone in on the culture and heritage of those places in the UK. Everything is included. So you've got your airfare, tuition and fees, accommodations, some of your meals, all of that is part of this. And participants are really able to study in a variety of places. So these, I mention these now because these are the 5 institutes for this summer. But this can change from year to year, and the topics for each of them may change from year to year. The really important thing is that in your application, you're trying to make some connection between what you want to study, what matters to you, and what the different institutions are doing. But that can be done in very broad ways. So for instance, there's one here that's for the Glasgow School of Art. It's under Technology, Innovation, and Creativity. And a few years ago, there was a student who was writing about how she wants to be a midwife. And so she was talking about the innovation and technology advances in midwifery as a part of her application. So you can see that there's a really wide range of how you can apply these different university or institution topics to what your interests and goals are. This is typically due in mid-February, so it's not uncommon for us to start working with students on this like at the end of November, early December, so that they're really prepared for that mid-February deadline and they don't get caught in that sort of winter break bubble that can happen. As part of this, and each of these pages you'll see has the amount of the different eligibility requirements, and we'll also have the application sort of requirements too. In this case, there is a personal statement. You do have to have a transcript. You do have to have 2 references, and there's some short essays as well. I should preface this by saying what I'm going to talk about today is a lot of information, and I am not going to read every single thing on the slides. But you will be receiving a link afterwards that goes to a YouTube video. So if there are things that you want to look at later, you can reference that before you come and talk to us, or just take a quick note now, but don't feel like you're missing out if I go past a slide too fast. Okay. The one thing I do want to point out, because this is the case for the summer institutes, is that you have to have at least 2 years of undergraduate study remaining after the institute finishes. And this is really important because each of these different awards has different requirements like that. Either you have to have had a full semester before you could go on the experience, or you have to have like at least a year left. So you always want to make sure that you're paying attention to what the specific requirements are for these awards, how they apply to you, and if there is a question about where you lie in there, that you're talking to us and you're also talking to your academic advisor to know exactly where you are in that sequence. Especially students that are coming in with lots of AP credit or lots of dual enrollment credit, your graduation date may vary greatly from some of your peers. So we want to make sure that you're still eligible for the things that you're interested in. This is also why it's important to think about these early. So the next one I'll mention is the Benjamin A. Gilman Scholarship. This is an award for up to $5,000 to study abroad for students that are receiving a Pell Grant or Pell Grant eligible. There's also additional awards, like if you're doing a critical language study, you can get more awards through there. The one thing that I want to point out about the Gilman is that our office has a really great track record with the Gilman. So just to give you an idea, we're usually above like 2.5 times above the national average for how many of our students are accepted. So if you're interested in the Gilman, we definitely want to make sure that you're coming to talk to us early. And one of the big requirements beyond the Pell Grant is just making sure that you are enrolling in something where you are receiving academic credit for that experience. There's lots of ways that you can receive credit. So some students do this through like international programs. They're doing maybe the Valencia program or the London program, right? Some students maybe they found an internship abroad that they want to go with. And so they're talking to their academic department to make sure that they're getting credit for that. You just want to make sure that if you're interested in the Gilman and you're eligible for the Gilman, that you're exploring those options. How can you receive credit for those experiences so that you still remain eligible for the Gilman? The nice thing about the Gilman is that you can apply to it at any time in your academic career, as long as you are enrolled in a credit-bearing program, and you don't actually need letters of recommendation for this. So there are 3 essays, a 4th if you're doing the critical language, and it has cycles in the fall and spring. So this becomes really handy because if you have something, say, lined up for summer 2024, right? You could apply in the fall and know by December whether or not you have funding for that opportunity in the summer. If you don't get it, you have a chance to reapply in the spring for funding that will also still work for that summer. So we really encourage people that are interested in the Gilman to come talk to us early. Even if like now you're thinking about, well, I think I want to do a program at this time, we can start planning for that now and get you sort of an action plan for when to approach these awards. The CLS or Critical Language Scholarship is an institute. It has different institutes around the globe for a very deep dive, intensive language study. So this is not like the typical study abroad program that has maybe fun trips scheduled in. I mean, it is fun, but the main thrust of this program is for you to have language immersion. In fact, you have to sign a waiver that says that you're going to speak that language and really try to learn that language. And I believe they have you take a test too at the beginning and the end to see what your language gains are. So if you're really into making games, this is the way to do that language wise. This is through the State Department. And the nice thing about it is that it does not require government service afterwards. So for students that are just interested in doing the language immersion, but they don't necessarily want to work for the government afterwards, this can be a nice way to get a really deep dive into a particular language. And a lot of these require no previous study of that language. So as you can see, any of these are considered critical need by the State Department. They're not expecting you to have experience in those languages. You just need to make a case in your application for why it is that you want to study that language and how that ties back into national security or your interests and goals, right? Now, if you're looking at some of these other languages, Arabic, Korean, Portuguese, Russian, you do have to have at least 1 year, and they expect anyone applying for the Chinese or Japanese language study to have at least 2 years under their belt. They do not necessarily have to be formal language study. So like maybe you have been are a native speaker, or maybe you've been working sort of independently. You just need to prove proficiency at those certain levels, okay? Here's some other requirements. The other thing I'll point out is that it is typically late November. Parallel to this program is one called the Boren. And the Boren is another language study program funded by the State Department. But in that case, what you have to do afterwards is work for the government for at least 1 year. So it's sort of like, they're almost like loaning you the funds to do that language study, and then you are paying them back with that 1 year of service. However, that 1 year of service can be met in a lot of different ways. So for some students, that's perfect for them. They were looking for that funnel into the US government. For other students, they're thinking, well, maybe I'll do the Peace Corps, you know, and go that route to pay back. So there's lots of ways. Basically what I'm saying for language study, CLS and Boren are the two big ones, and they're typically due around the same time. Boren has a little more of a lengthier process, but we usually start working with students on that in the fall semester for both of them. Okay, NSF REUs. These are great chances. I was going to ask how many of you are in STEM, but you can give a thumbs up in the chat, I guess. If you are in a STEM field, or frankly, if you're in even some of the social science fields at this point, NSF, which is the National Science Foundation, funds these research opportunities, research experiences for undergraduates. Basically, this means that a researcher at an institution has applied for an NSF grant, and they say, hey, I'd like to bring in maybe 8 to 10 undergraduates to my university. I'm going to have them do a project or projects while they're here for the summer. So these last, good 6 to 10 weeks during the summer, but everything is really paid for as part of it. The nice thing about NSF REUs is that they are for a variety of fields. So it used to be pretty strictly STEM, and now we're getting more into like small business innovation research, social and behavior and economic sciences. So there's lots of chances here to really NSF likes to posit themselves as this program being like people dipping their toe into research. So say you haven't had a chance yet to really deep dive into a particular field. Maybe you did the UROP program, but it wasn't exactly the type of research that you wanted to do. Or maybe you didn't do the UROP program, you're looking for other opportunities for the summer. These are great for that. They're typically due anywhere from like the beginning of February to mid-March. You can take a look at their website now to see what all the application cycle has looked like. There is a spot on their website that shows all the different sites, all the different topics that are available in the different institutions that are a part of that. So I definitely encourage you to check it out. If it's not something you can do this summer, then certainly thinking about next summer if you have some time in your schedule. Just to make it even more clear, multiple research topics, multiple sites across the nation for these NSF REUs, and they're all independently run. So you can apply to as many of these as you would like. A few summers ago, I had a student who hadn't had a chance to do much meteorology research, so she decided that she was just going to apply to all the places that she wanted to visit. So it's like 9 of them that had meteorology REUs. And she was actually offered positions, I think, in like 6 of them, and was then able to choose which one she wanted to attend. So I definitely recommend taking a look at that if you're in one of those STEM or accessory fields. There's lots of opportunities out there to explore and do research, especially if you haven't had a chance to really engage here at FSU yet. DoddRise is very similar to the NSF REU program, except that it's run through institutions in Germany. You do not need to be fluent in German. You don't even You don't even need to be a beginner in German really to apply. The only difference between, say, this and the NSF RU is that you have to apply for very specific places, and you can only have that one application. You can't have multiple applications like you can with the NSF program. But again, these are more of the STEM fields. It's housing abroad. They give about 300 scholarships every year. It's definitely something that if you're early in your career, this could be a nice way to not only go abroad, but do research abroad. These typically open in November and then they're due in December. So it's kind of a faster turnaround than some of our other awards. But again, we would start working with you as soon as those open, if not even earlier than that, to think about what places might you want, what institutions might you want to apply to, and how can we write your cover letters to match those places. Okay. The Goldwater Scholarship. This is an award that is only open to sophomores and juniors. So those of you that are currently doing research in this first year of, if you're a freshman, say, or maybe you're sophomores and you're just starting your research journey, this is a really fantastic award. Their basic idea is how can we fund the next generation of innovators and scientific thinkers? And they really want to make sure that what you're doing is they're able to fund you through those last few years of school so that you're not having to pick up like that extra shift at Starbucks. You're not having to do extra jobs elsewhere for funds. So it is $7,500 annually, but it's covering all of tuition, fees, books, room, board. They usually give about $500 a year. This is an award where you have to be nominated by FSU. So we have students every year that apply, and then we have a faculty committee that helps us find the 4 people that we can advance forward. Or if you are a transfer student, we can get away with having 5 nominations if one of them is a transfer student. So something we like to mention. This application opens in November. That campus deadline is in early November as well. But so we're usually working with students well in advance of that. We know exactly what those prompts look like. We can start working on those applications pretty early. If you do have experience researching and you want to be a career scientist, a career researcher, this is definitely an award you should keep in the back burner. Humanity in Action is a really interesting award that helps to foster sort of this international human rights advocacy. They have a few different locations depending on what you want to study within that program, but it's essentially like a cohort model. You're going to some of these places. In the case of, I don't know if Poland yet is back from being hybrid, and same with Bosnia. I'm not sure if those have been changed yet, but these are just a smattering of the places in Europe, and then in the US, there's actually the one in Atlanta. And the basic idea is that you're learning about human rights, social justice through the lens of the history of these different areas. If you check out their website, they've got a great breakdown of what past scholars through the fellows in Humanity in Action have done for their sort of follow-on projects. And the topics can include sort of a variety of things here. But like I said, they're all relevant to the history for that particular city or region. One of the really nice things that I think Humanity in Action does is they have a great senior fellow network. So everyone who's gone through the program makes themselves really accessible to people that are going through. So they want to really create it, and they have this fantastic network of people that really care about making change within different areas around the globe. So again, all benefits as well. All of that is funded through the award. And it's due in early January. So oftentimes we're working with people on this again, like probably right around Thanksgiving, like that sort of mid-November time. A lot of these awards you'll see are due like because they want like that first semester of schooling to be completed, so they'll be due in January or February, which is fine, but that also means we don't want you to have to be working over the winter holiday. So as much as possible, we try to meet with people early so that we can accommodate that part of everyone's schedule. Now, our office, like I mentioned, we help students with the application process. It can be kind of a daunting process. There's just many moving parts to that. But there are two main points I want to show on this website for you to follow. Our website is onf.fsu.edu, super simple. The two places I want you to be aware of are the tabs at the top here, important dates and student fellowships. So student fellowships is going to be really the database of the different awards we have worked with in the past or that we're currently working with. And you can filter in there just based on your student group, your interests, maybe how you identify. All of those things can be pulled up in the student fellowships tab. Now we are working on it currently. So there will be things that get an overhaul, but just know that that's where you can go first and foremost if you didn't hear anything that really piqued your interest or you want to see what all is out there. The other thing I'll point out is our important dates tab. And on that page, you will see all of our workshops, workshop schedules. You'll also see if we're having any alumni panels. We also put on there any of the major deadlines for different awards for that semester. So we try to keep that as updated as possible, as you can see if you registered, which you all did. We do things hybrid, so we try to accommodate as many students as possible by being in person, but by also being online. So I think we have a few workshops later this semester that are in-person events, but it's like a writing workshop. So those types of things, it's kind of hard for that to translate over Zoom. So we want to have people in here for those types of events. But all of that information can be found on that important dates tab. This is just to give you an idea of all of the places that our students have gone to. So in working with our office, I think since we started, we've helped students win over like 500 different awards, something to that effect. And these are just in the past year, all the places that our awardees have gone to by way of these fellowships. And I think that this is great. But I also do want to point out that there's a lot of utility to really forcing yourself to write about your goals and hone in on what your motivations are. And so this is great. Winning awards is nice, and certainly that's a great feather in people's caps. But there is also just through going through the process of having to write these applications, we want you to come out of that experience feeling fulfilled in that way too, right? So yes, obviously we want you to win. We're always rooting for our students. But first and foremost, we want you to feel as if you've really figured out your goals and motivations and why it is that you would apply for an award just beyond the financial value of that. And very quickly, because writing about this is so can be, I don't know, lack of a better word, awkward when you first get started on a fellowship application. And I'm not going to go into too much detail because we are going to be having a writing workshop in a few weeks with the Writing Center. But we do want to talk about, before you start writing, some things that you should consider, right? The writing process can be really difficult if you're just approaching it and you don't really have much of a plan. So really thinking about what motivates you to apply for an award, going deeper than just like, I need the money, because frankly, don't we all, right? But thinking about what contributions or impact do you hope to make in the future? How does this particular opportunity fit into your overall goals, right? Both academically, socially, career-wise. If you're starting with those questions, if you're thinking about those, it's a lot easier to get to sort of what you eventually end up writing. Okay. So personal statements, what they are and what they are not. And move this out of the way. Not where I want to go. Okay, so personal statements are really an opportunity for you to showcase your passion. It's a time for you to really talk about your deep motivations for why you're doing the things you're doing, right? And a time to talk about you. What they are not is just like a nice flowy version of your resume. Right? These applications usually have some type of character or word count limit. Maybe they have a page limit on things. We need to make sure that you're telling part of your narrative in a way that makes sense, but it's still getting at the prompt and not compromising who you are in the process. And that means that we're not going to be able to talk, you're not going to be able to talk about every single detail leading up to what you're applying for, right? For instance, maybe you're thinking about going into research, medical research, and that stemmed because maybe you had a grandparent, right, who was very sick. What we want to see in that personal statement is not necessarily you talking just about the grandparent, right? There's utility in that. We definitely want you to think about that. But what we want you to talk about more is your reaction to that. How did that impact you, rather than talking about just the grandparent? So I think, you know, our natural inclination with a lot of these writing is to think about, oh, well, here's this person that inspired me, and here's more about that person. But that person is not who is applying for the award, right? So we want to make sure that we're really getting at you and how you are relating back to that award. So what makes a personal statement effective, right? Well, it has to be authentic, it has to be relevant, and it has to be compelling. It has to have arc. How is it authentic? Because it sounds like your voice. We want it to sound like something that you would write. We don't want it to sound so polished in such a way that it takes out who you are and your characteristics. But we do want to focus on the opportunity. We want you to focus on why you're a great match for the opportunity. Maybe this is, you know, having to explore things that might be uncomfortable. And that's really where our office is here to guide you through that and make sure that what you're talking about doesn't make you feel exposed, but helps to enlighten the reader into why you would be a good fit for what you're applying to. We want them to be relevant, so they have to get to the point, right? Like I said, there's often a character limit, there's often a word count. You can't be too many of these sort of superfluous details about what's going on, because there's just no space for that. Where we can, we like you to share anecdotes that really get at the significance behind what you're applying to, right? So you may find as you start writing these anecdotes out that you're providing way too much information, way too much context. And so again, we're here to help you sort of get down to that anecdote nugget that really helps to showcase maybe the skills that are needed for this particular award, maybe the different types of traits that they're looking for from applicants. And we want them to be compelling. So again, we want to make sure that we're avoiding sort of cliche or overphrased uses. You know, I think if you think about one of the things that comes up when I work with students sometimes is they'll tell me, well, I've always been passionate about this. Like, well, first of all, there was a time when you were like a baby and no, you weren't. So we want to avoid these overused phrases and really get at the story that we're trying to talk about, right? We want to make sure that we're showing the reader, not just telling the reader. And we want to make a clear connection between how the experience that you're applying to is really going to get you to where you want to be. All right, all I'm going to say about first drafts is that everyone has to write them, and they are very, very rarely good. But you have to start somewhere. And so this is why it's important to start early on these awards and these different applications. There's lots of strategies for that, but we will also talk about that at our workshop. So just know, do not be intimidated by the first draft syndrome. Oh, we're not doing an activity. Sorry, don't feel like you have to do that. I mean, do this if you want to. You can pause it right here, maybe do a free writing thing, but we're not going to do that here. Upcoming workshops. So we have a few that are coming up, and they are not really aimed at students in the first and second year, but I think it's important to know that they're out there, because if you're interested in something like them, you want to be able to like start making that plan ahead of time. When you first come to our office, one of the first things that I know I do, and I'm sure Jesse and Christine also do, is talk to students about what their long-term goal is. And maybe we start thinking about like signpost awards that they will want to apply to later on in their career. So it's not something that you can necessarily do now, but if you know, like, hey, if I want to do this award, I really have to have more proficiency in a language, right? Like if you're applying to CLS, maybe you want to apply for the Arabic. Well, okay, that means that I'm going to have to do 2 semesters of Arabic before I can apply for that award. So if we can start talking to you about these very early on in your academic career, it'll make you have these sort of goalposts that you're going to be trying to achieve or apply to as the years roll on. That being said, later on this month, we've got, just on Thursday, actually, we're going to be talking about graduate study in the UK. So these are things like Rhodes, Marshall, what's the other one? Rhodes, Marshall, and what?
UK Fulbright.
No, because it's graduate study. But anyway, it's Rhodes and Marshall are sort of the 2 big ones, but there's a couple of other ones that you should know about. So if you're thinking about doing graduate study in the UK, this is definitely the workshop to attend. We'll be having a representative from Knight Hennessy Scholars coming next week to talk to everyone too. This is a great graduate study program. Like I mentioned, we're going to have the writing workshop. They're going to be presenting the Writing Center is going to be presenting a workshop on how to get started, right? So that sort of first draft syndrome, how do you get over that? And that's going to be put on by the Writing Center. That'll be here in-house. So I definitely recommend, even if you're not thinking about applying this year to something, coming to that just to see the tips and tricks that they have. It's useful information, not just for fellowships and awards, but even just starting, writing for classes. So definitely encourage you to sign up for that. That's on our website. And then public service fellowships is later on in March. And again, that's one that most of them will probably be aimed at sophomores and juniors and a few for seniors, but I recommend you come and check that out, especially if you're in those first 2 years, just to see what all is available. And then the last one that I'll mention is our Fulbright Programs Workshop. So Fulbright is an award, you may have remembered, I mentioned the US UK Summer Institutes. The Fulbright Programs is the larger one, and that is for students after they've graduated. We start talking to students about that though between their junior and senior years. So planning ahead, thinking about where you might want to study can be very helpful in that regard. All of the registration links are on that important dates tab of our website. So I definitely encourage you to check that out. Maybe look at some of the descriptions for a couple of these workshops and sign up, right? You can also sign up, and even if you can't necessarily attend, the ones that are hybrid, like I said, we'll be sending you the link for this video afterwards once it's on YouTube. Same is going to go for the rest of those as well. And if you are interested in talking to us, you have more questions, maybe there's some things that piqued your curiosity, please contact us. We would love to talk to you about that, right? Our office is located in HSF. So if you're familiar with the Chick-fil-A on campus, we are on the 3rd floor of that building. Right off of Landis Green. You can also email our central email address at onf.fsu.edu. That is all of our contact information by person, but if you email that central one, we'll get it sent out to everyone. In fact, the best thing that you can do when you email us is say, this is who I am, this is maybe what I'm interested in, or what I'm interested in doing. Even if it's, I don't know what I'm interested in doing, but I want to know what's out there. And here is my availability for the next 2 weeks, Monday through Friday from 9 to 4, right? If we have that information, one of us can very quickly email you back and say, hey, I'm available at this time. Does that still work for you? We also are on all of the socials, which I realize maybe none of you are actually using. It's probably your parents at this point, but we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, and that I think probably Instagram is where we get the most engagement from students, but we try to post anytime we have flyers, any events coming up, any fellowships that people have, that foundations have sent to us, try to post everything as soon as possible on the socials. Okay. So with that said, thank you for listening. I know that was a lot of information. I hope you all got stuff out of it. Do you have any questions? And feel free to unmute if you want to. No, yeah, no problem. Thank you. And yeah, that's it. Thanks, everyone.